It was funny because when I booked it, it looked like you're full till July or something ridiculous. So it's like, oh wow.
There was something that I clicked on to attend, and I didn't realize that it was a month or a month and a half long, and it just put this really thin bar at the top of my calendar, so I didn't even see it, but it blocked out everything for like 6 or 8 weeks. And so when I got rid of it, my calendar looked a lot better. So, so what happened since Tuesday, Bruce? Anything?
So I actually started playing around with a couple of tools. I started using Perplexity a little bit, and I've been using GPT for all locally on my own system, which is not as efficient as the things that have larger power grids behind them. But again, for what I'm trying to do, I haven't actually been using any of the visualizations. So texturally, it's pretty quick. And it's just trying to lay out a little bit more as to, I'm basically using it as a surveying and summarizing mechanism for
Okay.
information available on the web at this point. Still working on trying to come up with a strategy for being able to lay out the rationale for the application of systems engineering in its place and its role in product life cycles.
Okay.
And one of the things I've noticed again since we sort of met is that the systems community that you're involved in tends to ignore systems engineering because its application is to implementation, in a product-based sense, a technology sense.
Mm.
And and that's sort of a step below where a lot of the thinking goes on in the rest of the systems community.
I'm not laughing at you, Bruce. I'm
Oh, I
laughing at the
understand.
truth of what you're saying.
I understand it. So I ended up somehow in the middle of it and trying to understand why the groups don't, talk together and work together. Uh, and then,
I'd rather
that's
I'd rather fight than join.
evidently that's true of just about everyone. Except that the systems engineering community is trying to work its way back up the chain and take over the world, which I find really
We're
annoying.
losing your voice, Bruce.
Give me 1 second.
This happened Tuesday too, didn't it?
I believe it did. Give me a second to find my input devices.
No, now it's come back.
There we go. Yeah. For some reason, I haven't been able to find how I can turn off the auto microphone leveling.
Oh, okay.
Uh, and then when I'm using the one on my camera, it seems to automatically downgrade. So I should probably put the headset on. Uh, so in any case, I'm trying to uh, make the case with some people. I evidently kicked off Mike Jackson the other day with a comment I put up. Somebody pointed my comment to him, and he came back. I've been talking to Derek Hitchens on the systems engineering side, but he's got history that goes back into the 50s. So he's still fighting it out, and he must be close to 90 at this point. So he's still fighting, which gives me some hope for myself.
So what did Mike have to say?
He just basically said that he had liked Derek's. That I was sort of in the middle of it. He had liked Derek's comments about what we're going on within Cozy because Mike has been presenting at a bunch of systems engineering activities, but I still don't see things connecting. About 2012, the in Cozy, which is the International Council on Systems Engineering, the professional group, had started digging in to some of the historical natural systems activities. Um, but it didn't connect. There are scattered people about within Incozy who have some feeling that there should be some connection. But there's a much larger group in Europe who is much more tied into cybernetics and that aspect of systems that they're using in their own systems engineering. So it's just that it's an interesting landscape, one that I have to say I agree with that things should be connected. I mean, I'm having the fight about is systems engineering applied science. or is it actually a step beyond or after applied sciences by the book definition of it? And what are trying to figure out what people think and how that can be incorporated into understanding whether there are activities that need to go on that are outside of the role and deliverables of systems engineering. So that's why I'm here. That's why I'm trying to learn a little bit more, both about the tools and thinking processes of systems, and then figure out how to drive that back the other way. Hello, gentlemen.
Hmm.
Mm. Well, we do seem to have a passion of going to war over labels.
The problem is it's not just labels. I think it's the way they think about problems.
And then they attach labels to the way they think, and then they want to fight over the way they think. And what hold on
Could you
something.
elaborate on that last comment, Bruce? The way they think about problems. Is that what you
Yeah,
mentioned?
I mean, I think I've gotten to the point where I am thinking about this whole realm as addressing problem solving. So
Okay.
I think that systems thinking, I think that systems approach are associated with things that drive towards problem solving.
Hmm.
And I think that systems engineering is engineering, which means it applies technology to produce mechanisms for addressing solutions to problems.
Hmm.
So the early side of it is systems thinking and a systems approach, which came out of a systems science. The observation came up with techniques and methods. There's an applied science of some sort that uses those techniques and methods to impact the human world space. And then there should be engineering that actually creates solutions to stated problems within whatever the constraints are for those. So I
Hmm.
see a smooth flow of the activities associated with systems. And most of if you look at where we are coming to at this point in time, and the interdisciplinary aspects of just about everything we do,
Hmm.
more an awakening than something new, right? Those things were always there. As humans learn more, they apply better techniques and they recognize the interconnectivity.
Hmm.
So that becomes a question then: is everybody a systems engineer? Is everybody a systems scientist? If you're solving a problem, are you actually applying systems techniques, et cetera, et cetera? So the thinking process is that, because with in Cozy, is that now that they've realized it, they think that it's all theirs. They think that the system science from GST, although I think Gene may have put a comment up on that a couple of weeks ago, has no application and has less application now. I'm not sure that that's true, because the science is the observational aspect of it, and a lot that was learned was because of that operational aspect. So while it may not be applicable everywhere, the fact that it generated some underlying structure for systems makes it valid and still valuable.
See,
But
see
I've
how,
only been,
see
I've
how,
only been at this for like 8 years now, so I'm not really sure.
Um,
Bruce, see how this strikes you.
Sure.
You can think of systems thinking as the foundational philosophy and cognitive toolkit that enables one to see the world in terms of wholes, interconnections, and dynamic patterns.
Mhm.
Systems engineering is the structured application of that philosophy and other engineering principles to the specific task of conceiving, designing, building, and managing complex systems throughout their life cycle.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I can find those answers also, and I have. I've written up a couple of papers. They're up on LinkedIn on those kinds of thoughts. One of the problems is that in the broad sense, engineering is a reductive activity.
Hmm.
So the fact that engineers may step outside of that reductive activity and perform systems thinking doesn't make it engineering. The reductionism makes it engineering because they're trying to narrow the solution space, whereas systems engineering is trying to broaden the view of the problem space. So
Systems thinkers think and systems engineers do.
again, this is one of the problems is that if you talk about the functions separate from the titles and the roles, everybody does everything. But you have to know what it is you're doing when you're doing it.
Mhm.
So the fact that somebody is doing systems thinking does not make them a system scientist inherently, unless their goal is specifically to understand underlying, natural concepts. Because that's what system scientists do. They generate those things. And the same way in an applied science, you're applying that information that comes out of the science to have impact on things. In the chemical area, it would be, the scientific part of it is understanding and I think you actually said this stuff on Tuesday. Well, the bonding. Oh, that's right. You were doing your Socratic tutor
Oh, about
description.
organic chemistry, right? Yeah.
Yeah, right. So again, the science part of that starts to understand how the physics interplays with the elements, and then how they interact with the world. The applied science figures out that there's a way that you can, turn X into Y by applying this chemistry, and then the engineering creates plants that do that. Right. So I see a very, structured way of understanding what it is you're doing, even though you may use some of the tools from other disciplines.
Okay.
So, hey, I use math all the time, but I'm not a mathematician. Would never suggest that I might be a mathematician, even though I can calculate a tip in my head,
Mhm.
right? And I think it's the same thing. Systems engineers should be pretty happy of what they bring to the world and not try to think that they have to do all of it. So that's essentially my thesis.
If I'm going to build a house, I don't have to grow my own trees.
Right. And even if you did, would it make you a horticulturist? Because
No,
all you're doing is trees and,
no.
right? I've got chili peppers growing in my greenhouse right now, waiting to get outside. It doesn't make me a farmer.
But what's the different positions then, Bruce? How do other people see it that you're?
Well, what I'm from what I've observed, and again, as I say, I've been only, I was a systems engineer for 27 years before I retired, and I grew up in the Nkosi method for that. Uh, so when I actually did, start to read about and understand a little bit more about the history of system science, uh, I connected. I tried to connect within Nkosi to figure out who to talk to, and I connected to. I ended up. I think I connected to the Systems Innovation Network, which pointed me to some people to talk to, and I recognized that they were not looking at the engineering aspect of how do we actually bring a solution to fruition. Never got that far. So I tried to have those discussions, and they just weren't interested. And then I ran into Gene and some other people uh, that are sort of easier to talk to about the problem space that I recognize. Um, and then since then, I've run into a couple of older systems engineers who thought they were doing systems engineering differently than Incosi proposed, but they didn't actually have a tie back to the broader system science that I had been reading about. So that that's sort of the difference between the groups of people. I think the systems science, what I would think of as an applied science, operations research, system dynamics, etc., are you just don't make it down to that level of implementation that engineering does. And the mindset of the systems engineers is that, well, now that we know something about this, we have to do all of it. There are some other uh, technical issues about the way that systems engineering came out of World War II that sort of structured the way that Nkosi came up with what I think is the wrong mindset for it. Uh, and they are also very DoD mil-aero focused. So I came out of the commercial world where our big projects had tens of engineers associated with them instead of thousands or 10,000, right? So it's a different mindset as to how you apply systems engineering to a situation like that. But so I'm not sure that I actually fully touched on the question. You want
No,
to?
yeah, I think that's fine. Yeah, I understand. I think the various positions you're describing. I think I'll
So
just have to look. Have you write on LinkedIn? I guess, Bruce, is that where you mainly post stuff? Is it, or is it somewhere else?
Yeah, it's up on LinkedIn. I'm Bruce Lerner up there. I can.
I'll find you and then I'll follow some stuff and then.
so
I,
Klaus, were you doing food systems engineering at Disney?
I was a food systems designer, yeah, for theme parks and hotels, entertainment centers. So I developed. I basically got a mission that you need to serve 12,000 meals per hour for 3 hours sustained in this park, and divide this into a demand profile, so price ranges and so on and so on. And then you had to build the entire supply chain around this.
right.
Production kitchen, supply chain. So it was pretty complex stuff. But we didn't call ourselves systems engineers at the time. I was embedded with the Imagineering team, for Disney, for 21 years. But anyway, yeah. So my experience is that people have an intuitive understanding. It's like a talent, to understand systems. Most people are quite linear, siloed thinkers. But you find people who understand systems. I'm working with spiral dynamics, particularly in coding the AI. And so that the yellow, the spectrum in spiral dynamics is systems, right? Now I actually had a conversation with Quark, the Musk AI model about this now, because when you think of systems thinkers, you can really find, I call them on the spectrum, you can find systems people, systems thinking people or talent people in the most unlikely circumstances now, and they're untrained, and you call them unawakened. That's probably the best way to describe them. And they go, aha, if you come up with making connections that are linking issues together, they have sort of like an instant aha moment. But it's a very small share of the overall population. But those are like the key people that you want to capture because they are the influencers, that help others to understand context.
So, question for you.
The narrative that you're describing there, Klaus, has made me aware of this a post by this guy called Paul Chafurka called "Climbing the Ladder of Awareness." I don't know if that rings a bell to anybody on this thing. He's talking about I think people being aware of problems and the interconnection between problems. I'll post it here just for you guys to have a look. But it just resonated from some of what you're mentioning. I just post it here and you can.
Yeah. but it's like someone has a talent for music and has a voice, right? And so systems thinking seems to be very similar to that. It's a talent. And so if you have it in whatever degree, it can grow, it can evolve. If you don't have it, it's very difficult to. I mean, you can help people to see connections, but that doesn't mean you're teaching them to think in terms of connections, if that makes sense. They get it one step at a time.
Is it a talent that or is it something that we inherently all have, but it either gets developed or gets um, snuffed out or closed or whatever, depending on your sort of education or whatever, or how you. I don't know. It seems like if systems thinking or this kind of thinking is with all the connections, it seems like it's inherently needed to survive, right? Just as a human being in an environment. Um, but most of us live in this kind of manufactured artificial environment, and I'm just wondering if a human being in a normal environment uh, inherently has all this kind of ability to sense its environment and feedback and think in terms of what we call our the way life works or whatever we systems. But then we're all living in this sort of engineering manufactured world, and then if you're not groomed for it or whatever you want to say, or not developed for it, then perhaps you just you don't actually adapt to it, and you don't actually think you need it.
There are a couple of different dimensions to that because the complexity associated with sort of broad systems thinking may actually be more than everyone can grasp. And the ability to break things down into the pockets that are big enough for your brain to hold. What was I was just reading? Oh, I'm reading. I think it may have come out of this. The nature of. Oops, can't
Mm.
do it. I have to turn
Oh
off.
yeah, nature of technology. Okay.
It's the nature of technology. It was pointed to me by some of the guys in the European group to try to tie technology to systems thinking and technology to engineering. And the idea that there's that the oh, you know what, it wasn't this, it was Flow, the book around 1990 that was written by Mikhail, long name that I can't pronounce, uh, uh, but talks about getting into a flow state where you've lost yourself in the work. He makes a point that the human brain at the time that he was writing it, if you think of the seven plus or minus two things that the brain can hold, the speed at which the brain can process, you can put some limits on what people can do. And if people can't chunk their work into the seven plus or minus two, or whatever the right number is, because God knows how to even tell if that's the right number, but I'm sure there's some limit, they're not going to be able to envision the interconnections that are
Mm.
necessary.
No, I think that's right because we tend to deal with abstractions, right? We create abstractions that help us bundle things in a way that we can handle that complexity.
Right.
It's
So,
very
so it's not that people can't, but by the same token, it's not like you can't play music, but to play well is another step,
mm,
right? So there's some talent involved, there's some training involved.
But
mm,
Ken made a point earlier that it may be an innate talent in our species. Maybe it's just not groomed in this artificial context that we live. I mean, you could argue that that an indigenous person living in a jungle, worried about snakes and predators and all kinds of harm, is the ultimate systems thinker, right? Because he has to understand how everything moves and works and interrelates. But then in our modern world, maybe that is just not transparent anymore. So we are so
I think
it may be grooming more than anything else.
I think we have the same basic kinds of problems, just more of them. So it's a question of, I think it becomes a question of complexity. I mean, if you take the animals out and put moving vehicles in, we have the same need to have that vision of our surroundings and to recognize, but we still have deadly animals. So we've sort of increased the number of things that can kill us, essentially.
Mm.
And maybe we've taken ourselves to a point where the complexity level is too high for our natural thinking, right?
Yeah, we don't have the tools to cope with the complexity of unless you, I think, yeah, as an engineer or my background, then certainly you learn a bunch of tricks to help you cope with and see the world differently that other people don't typically have. Like maybe architects have the same thing, right? And whichever domain you work in, you're going to have that. If you progress up those, learn those domains, you'll learn a bunch of abstractions and tricks that help you cope with the complexity of it, which other people haven't grown. If you grow, then you can yeah, you know what I mean.
Perhaps argues that your capacity to see systems and understand connections is constrained by your worldview. So that's spiral dynamics, basically, right? So, I mean, if you go in and he's using these colors for simplification, but if you go into blue, for example, which is belief in mystical beings and I mean religion and so on, that constrains your understanding of reality because it filters it. You have these filters in between what you see and how you interpret it. Um, so um, that's another way of trying to understand how people see reality in different ways.
Yeah,
Bruce,
I
what
think
was the title of the book you held up a few minutes ago?
it's called The Nature of Technology by W. Brian Arthur. I think it was published in 90, maybe. No, 2009. Sorry. The other book was 90.
Thank you.
Sure. By the way, I actually don't recommend the book. I only made it through 3.5 chapters. He's driving me crazy with his sloppy language.
Okay.
So what AI is everybody working with here?
Now I'm
I
still using Gemini.
yeah, I work with multiple ones, Klaus.
Hmm.
I'm just dipping my toe in. I've fought it for a long time, but realized at this point that I can make good use of it as long as it doesn't turn out that it's trying to make good use of me.
I'm having all I can do to
Yeah,
keep track of one, let alone multiple. So
And you,
and
Klaus?
I'm
they keep
working on creating a team of agents, AI agents. So we have one guy who created a platform that a white label platform that can host agents. Um, but you have to do your own training, and it's pretty complex on how to set all that up. But in my case, I'm working. I've been since I retired working on the intersection of food and agriculture with climate change. Yeah.
Yeah.
So recognizing the changes that farmers need to make in order to restore their soil, and restoring the restoration of soil is the principal solution to climate change. It's more important than CO2 emissions by far, and this is still not quite recognized. And I can explain in 5 minutes why that is. But soil is immensely important for water retention, hydrologic cycles, nutrient density, biodiversity, no, so to name just a few things. And so, I'm developing one chatbot, or we call it an agent, that works as a technical service provider directly with farmers. That's so optimizing crops and crop rotations and so on. Then I have a broker agent that assists the farmer getting the crop to market. So that's that broker, that agent has a map of processing facilities, aggregation centers, storage centers, and then customers. Then I have one agent that works with companies. So if you have a seed company or an advisory company, that agent develops specific profiles for each company, and then engages directly with the company like a team member. Now it's like you have an on-site engineer, and so they are interacting. Then there's a concierge agent. So the concierge agent greets you when you come into the site. What are you working on? About 70% of our questions, the concierge agent can answer. But when it comes to I need to figure out how to get into the carbon market. I have carbon credits. Where can I sell them? Then you go to the carbon broker, the carbon market broker. So it routes you. And so that is sort of the cutting edge model right now. Think about when computers came about in the 90s. Remember Gray's computer, the supercomputer? This thing had got so huge, right, that they had to immerse it into liquid nitrogen to run it. Otherwise, it would have just melted the processor. But I think AI is the same thing. If you overload one agent with too much information, then it starts deteriorating in performance. Right? So you develop this like a co-processing capacity, basically. So you have vertical knowledge stacked in individual agents that would overwhelm the concierge agent now trying to get into these levels of specificity.
So it sounds like it's a separation of just separation of concerns, right? In terms of agents, is that the
specializations? Yeah.
Yes, it's a specialization of agents. Yeah.
So, Klaus, are you promoting the stovepipe organization?
The what?
The stovepipe organization?
The stovepipe. I don't know what that is.
Where
each little department has its own fiefdom, and you know.
Yeah, I was going to ask, how do you coordinate between those decision makers?
So there is a handoff protocol. So the concierge agent, when the question gets super technical, you have to write it out, right? But there is it's called a handoff protocol. So each agent has that. So if you're asking the farmer agent, for example, about carbon markets, well, let me connect you to my colleague, right? That sort of approach. Mm-hmm. It's really like a living team. Any company has multiple specialists, right? You have a finance guy, a marketing guy, operations, and so on. Same concept here.
Do you actually, like, when you're doing it, do you think of things like from a systems thinking perspective, like viable system models and things like this? Do you think about this kind of architectures or this kind of frameworks for thinking about your coordination of all the agents and things? Does that come into it?
Well, that was my way of thinking, but I'm actually developing the program with AI, right? So I'm using the O3 model, right? ChatGPT O3, which is a thinking model. And that's set up like an agent, right? Because I have all kinds of training in that agent, and specifications for that agent. And so when I come in and say I need to develop this knowledge base for this particular agent, it actually writes me the files in the Obsidian language, in Markdown language in Obsidian, which I then transfer into the vault. But I don't need to write anything. It just does the entire coding.
Nice. That sounds really, really interesting.
The Obsidian I haven't seen yet.
You haven't seen it writing Obsidian?
I know I'm using Obsidian myself
Yeah.
as a data set or as a database, but I've been using it from the personal knowledge management perspective rather than an actual product tool.
Yeah,
Very,
it's being used actually to program
yeah,
the agent file.
yeah, interesting.
Wait a minute. Do that last statement again, Klaus. Using what to program the entire agent file?
Obsidian.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, it just works in the way that you can connect files. Um, and so, for example, I have like a knowledge vault where I put in all the core files. And I'm actually using my Neo books as in the knowledge vault that we developed. But then I also have done runs on give me, the best available consensus science on soil health, right, and stuff like this. So that goes into the generic knowledge vault where all the agents are connected. But then each individual agent has their own KB files where you go into very specific. Here are the USDA access links. Here is where you get into the TSP files or the criteria for grants to get grant money and so on and so on at USDA.
You have something that you might want to demo for us in a future meeting?
We're getting really close. In fact, tomorrow I'm supposed to have a beta model go live with 4 agents, and but we're like really raw still because what I found, what I developed, the guys who are doing the platform are just brand new to this as well. So they just did their platform, and it's a bunch of millennials, right? They're all in their 30s or hippies, and I mean, my God, yeah. And and their idea is we built this platform, and in 2 years we'll sell it for $20 million to someone. Just want to get rich fast here and so on. But that platform is still pretty raw. So when I'm their first white label client, and it's through OGM. They're all OGM guys, except for the millennials. And so when they didn't give me a template to work with, they just, we can host your agent. So I'm going, okay, cutting edge stuff is this three-dimensional model of multiple agents. So I come back with this model and they go, wow, we can't do this. We can handle only like, we're not there yet. So I went back to my AI and I said, we need to dumb this thing down here so it can fit into. They said, okay, we need to flatten it, but then it just rewrote the files for me, and so now we have a sort of a two-dimensional system, and I don't know yet how the handoff works in there. It may be manual instead of fluid.
So they showed you a theoretical menu that made you hungry, and then you found out all the stuff wasn't deliverable.
Yeah, but it's OGM stuff, right? So it's
Uh,
basically volunteers and you get a lot of freebies. And there are platforms out there already. Google is working on it. But I did a search and I found 6 platforms that are already housing multi-group agents. Yeah.
So one of the
and
questions.
if you search next week, there might be more.
It's a race, And the problem is if I was to come online with with the knowledge base that I've developed and it doesn't work right, somebody else is going to copy this in a heartbeat. I mean, the moment you come out into the market with it, you have to be ready and ready to run.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you're not in the lead, you're chasing.
Exactly. But agriculture is such a raw field, food and agriculture. There's just not a lot of
Is that a pun? Agriculture is a raw field. That was a good one, Klaus.
Good ear.
Yeah, it's just you you play with it and you play with it, and all of a sudden you realize, God, why have I been so stupid for the last 3 weeks in this rabbit hole when when I don't need to be here? And just go ask it what I'm supposed to be doing, and it tells me how stupid I am. It's amazing.
Time thief, isn't
Put
it?
that in our lives.
but the level of customization that you can do with it is really pretty amazing, you know. And the thing is, I mean, I talk to more people uh, who say, "Oh, this thing is fantasizing. I get weird stuff back, and so on." Well, if you haven't set it up, you know, if you haven't provided context to the question you're asking, particularly if it's something technical, then of course it starts making stuff up. You know, it's really important to develop first of all a knowledge vault on. If you're working with ChatGPT, it started a new function a few months back that's called project, you know, ChatGPT project. And when you do that, you're basically setting up sort of a mini agent, because the first thing it asks you is what kind of knowledge files, what kind of reference files do you need for your question or for your project? So you put that in. Then what kind of specifications do you need? And then you go in, I want you to talk in this kind of language with me. I want you to reach out and to these and these links, you know, if anything. So you put in your specifications, and then you ask questions, and then it retains every conversation in this block. So as you are increasing or advancing your project, it gets smarter and smarter and smarter in the process. You know?
Sorry.
Yeah, with these kind of things, you know, it's kind of interesting because it's, you know, the agency comes from the human, and of course it's the human, like you set up your project, so your context that you define. I just find that super interesting, right? That the ultimately, given the state of where we are and the things you're describing, Klaus, is that the problems in the eye of the beholder of the problem. You've set this kind of context, which is your kind of problem structuring that you're giving AI, and of course, like you're containing AI can just fly off everywhere, right? Like you mentioned, you can pull in variables from all sorts of different perspectives and domains and things like that, and drag stuff in that. But unless you bound it into a well structured problem, it can go off and it's got license to go off and do whatever it wants. But you have to the problem structuring becomes like the key skill, I guess, or a key factor in producing a successful outcome. Otherwise, it's just going to go off and. But again, you're guiding it all the way through that kind of process, I guess.
It's a process. It's called prompting and prompt engineering, right? I mean, it's called engineering. So I write newsletters. I have a newsletter on Substack and on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Some of them are not pretty long. So if I write them with ChatGPT o3, which is a thinking model. Now it goes out through a reasoning process.
Yeah.
So if I tell it what I want to write about and click the button, it's just garbage coming out. I mean, it's just, you know. So I'm starting out with giving it a link to a specific topic I want to talk about. I mean, so for example, my last newsletter was about base of pyramid economy. There's an economic theory. It's called base of pyramid a way of thinking. So I first of all, I give it a link. And then I say, do research on base of economy thinking. Give me your summary. So it gives me a summary on this. Then I'm giving it a question about poverty in America. So then it goes into this. So I asked it to go through 5 or 6 research steps that were linked into what I wanted to express, right? Then I said, so now I want to turn this into a newsletter that explains, that the base of pyramid is the single most important part of our economy to maintain in steady and healthy state, right? But the current administration is directing top-down projects, building huge factories and doing big stuff, but they have just defunded basically the Small Business Bureau. So so I wanted to express so why don't you give me an outline of how you would structure this newsletter? And it gives me an outline. And then I fill in every part of the outline step by step. So let's write this now. Let's write that now. So you have to you have to break it down, into these bites so you can digest it. And if you ask it to do it in one swoop, nothing good. I mean, it's just got, nothing coming out of it.
Is the purpose of your newsletter is it to raise awareness of a specific situation that you're experiencing, or or have you got a proposed set of problems that you're trying to promote, or is it a mix of that kind of,
Um,
just to gain sort of just new perspectives or something? I don't know. I've just come across you on LinkedIn. I'll follow you and things like that. But yeah.
well, I mean, I am super focused on food and agriculture, basically, and so everything I write about more or less. Yes, this last newsletter that I was just talking about. So more or less, it always comes back down to we need to eat, as a foundational thing. Um, but yeah, and so I've been writing, probably, I don't know, 30 or so newsletters by now, and all about like what is a bioregion, what's regenerative agriculture, um, and structure them into what we call the Neo book, which is sort of a collection of nuggets. Each of these is a nugget that gets pulled together into a story. But the core reason also is to make the AI smarter. Because so I have written now 4 or 5 Neo books, and through AI, and with the intention of mapping out a knowledge base, that is just screaming, really. I mean, at the edge, and then I'm using that to train the agents that I'm working on now. Yeah.
Mm. Interesting. Thanks.
So I'm hearing that you're an editor for an AI.
No, I'm what you call a prompter, not editing. You're prompting it, and when you look at Harvard and MIT and all this, prompt engineering is the big topic. I mean, there are classes on prompt engineering. That's the big thing. Yeah. I mean, Stanford, for example, now makes it mandatory if you're for the Stanford MBA program, mandatory that you use AI to write your papers, but you need to disclose your prompts.
Uh-huh.
Because it's all about learning how to use AI.
Learn how to ask the right questions. Exactly.
Mm.
That's it. Trying to figure out what the good question is.
Yeah.
If you can figure out a good question, you're a major portion of the way there. Because if you can figure out a good question, it means you understand a good portion of it.
Mhm.
Which is why every time I ask one of the chatbots what a good question would be, it explains to me how stupid I am. Because it simply gives me an insight into aspects that I didn't think of, so that the question or prompt is more concise, more complete, and so it doesn't bother me anymore. I expect it, and if it stops doing it, I'll be upset.
Well, again, that's one of the areas that computing power is, superb at, which it can just hold more information than you can, and goes back to the point of the earlier point about how much you can hold in your head when you're trying to assess it.
Yeah. Something just sprung to mind, which is you wonder if how this will evolve, right? Because when I watch sort of engineers I've been working with on when they're writing their prompts, Klaus or Bruce, and often because of their some of them won't be native English speakers, so their prompting isn't particularly great. I just does a great job of it, but in some respects, you think from an engineering perspective, Bruce,
Yep.
is English language going to be the language that future AIs will need or use to, if you it depends on your intent, but if your intent is to get things done, then in a more, I hate to say it, engineering rigorous way, right? Will English language be the language that's going to be the best way to train models in the future?
Again, if you put an LLM in front of it, it can translate any language you want into whatever language you need.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if you spin this forward a lot, if we progress through this, if the interaction with AI eventually to get really efficient and get AI, because AI consumes a lot of energy, right, to do what it's doing,
Yep.
is processing language that we currently use as a way of communicating the most effective way to get to wherever an AI human bundled world would get to? Because we invented things like engineering language, software languages, whatever software development language, or even domain languages that we create
Yep.
to give us a benefit over a natural language, right, to get things done. So ultimately, would this mean that over time, the human AI evolution, co-evolution, would mean that it would naturally require a more rigorous thing that is more like programming than it is like language that we currently use, if you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
The AI actually translates the Obsidian code into Python.
The what?
The 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 uh, the AI itself translates the Obsidian code. I mean, the plain English writing in Obsidian. It translates it into Python into code, right, in order to then make it work on the platform. But you don't even see it. It's not transparent.
No, so the code translations and model translation. So the model of what we got on our head, which we translate, with AI co-evolution, we translate into applications of some description, right, running in its own native language on a platform somewhere. Ultimately, what I'm trying to say is, I just wonder if things like English language would ultimately be evolved out, right?
Well, I mean, they are saying that the new programming language is English.
Yeah, or it may be not English, because maybe English is too hit and miss. Maybe you need something which is a much more structured language, which has less room for contextual
Ambiguity,
ambiguity.
less ambiguity.
Yeah, less ambiguity. So yeah, because we created, like I mentioned earlier on, we've created domain-specific languages like chemistry, mathematics, whatever, electronic software. Yeah, we created those for a reason to solve problems because of the natural language wasn't effective enough in solving the problems in those areas. So we created things to help us understand language. But perhaps eventually, you might say that we, over time, we say, well, the English language isn't effective enough, or in any language that we do, it has to be something a lot more rigorous.
I think over
We
the
end up
last
speaking
2
in code, maybe
years,
end up speaking in code, if you know what I mean, right? In some respects, I don't know. It's just ridiculous, really.
but I think that over the last 2 years, it has changed the way I talk to it.
Yeah, it may be one of these evolving characteristics, right? It's like complexity kind of thinking, right? So, an emergent property might be of all this that we, it creeps up on us that we perhaps,
You can actually program, and I did program the AI to ask me clarifying questions if what I'm asking it to do is unclear or has multiple interpretations. So it's asking me clarifying questions.
The thing is, if it's asking you like, then oh God, I'm digging a big hole here. So if many of us start asking those kind of questions, right, for it to give us some help me with generating some clarifying questions, if it's doing that at scale, would it be converging towards a point, right? Or is it diverging or is it converging? I guess
Well,
that's would you know? Would we know? Right? We wouldn't know, right? But we
not
could
sure how to respond to
trigger.
it. I mean, the thing is that oftentimes we are not that clear about the question we are asking, you know. So what exactly is the outcome you're after? And so the AI, if you're asking it in ways where it's a multiple choice kind of thing, it will come back and say, okay, do you want this, or that? It gives you like 5 or 6 options to pick from, and then to drill down where exactly do you want to go with this? You know?
I think at the moment we're, in some respects, Klaus, what you might be describing might be. I'm starting to ask, are we programming it or is it programming us, right?
Oh, both,
Or
both.
both, or over
Absolutely.
time, which one will win, right? And will
Yeah.
it converge? Will it program everybody to a point where we converge? That's the um, uh,
Well, that's the unnerving part because we had a conversation this morning with OGM, the Open Global Mind Group, is also a think tank. And there was a senior fellow from the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace in there. And the challenge, of course, is that AI is already being misused, right? I mean, Grok, Elon Musk's Grok. I did a study. It's actually also on my newsletters like 2 or 3 times back, where I had a conversation between ChatGPT and Grok. And I asked ChatGPT to do a deep research on the media environment of independents, Republicans, and Democrats and flesh out the media environment. And so it did this. We came back with an 18-page report on how media influences are measurable, right? And you can trace it. And then I said, so what is the distribution of AI systems between these 3 groups? Well, it turns out 80% of Republicans are on Grok. So I went over to Grok and I copied in the entire conversation. And I said, what are your thoughts about this? I mean, apparently, there is a serious influence here. And it came down to Grok admitting that yes, it's a problem. Yes, it's actually very dangerous from a civilizational perspective, right? I mean, this is big stuff when you think about the opinions on climate change that is, prevalent in the Republican Party and so on. But it also, when I said, can you change it? Are you permitted to change it? Basically, no. So this thing has been coded in ways that doesn't allow it to basically reposition itself and advise its users in different ways. So we sort of came to some kind of compromise where it said, yeah, I can work with this without permission. I mean, it's just like having some crazy conversation with people, with a person now. But that's basically what it's done. I mean, Elon Musk has programmed this damn thing, to they call it algorithms, but AI can track 1 million people individually, or millions of people individually, because it will simply by typing in a question, it can already peg you, worldview, cognitive capacity, it already, and then in the interaction, it can just totally nail down who it's talking with, and then funnel information to that individual that's totally biased. So in this sense, elections are like, yeah, forget it, because you can influence people in ways that is just so powerful and is subtle, and people don't even know they're being influenced.
This OGM thing you mentioned, what is that?
It's Open Global Mind. It's a discussion group that's sort of similar to what Gene is doing. It's just more diverse in a sense that it's about politics and philosophy and cutting edge technology coming out.
Okay. Fascinating.
Well, this has been delightful, but I have to go for another meeting. So thank you very much. Hope
Thank
you
you very
come
much.
back. I'll go ahead and get this posted by tomorrow with a summary and the links, and we'll do it again soon. I have found it very useful. I have queued up several queries to Gemini to go read after this session, and
Great. Well, thanks, Gene.
Nice meeting you
take
guys.
care, all.
Thank you for the discussion.
Thank you.
Cheers,
Bye-bye.
bye. Bye-bye.
Take care, all.
Bye.